Severe weather across the entire eastern half of the United States is going to be front and center tonight and Monday. And of course, we're still dealing with this wretched backdoor cold front that's stuck to the south across southern New Jersey and southern Pennsylvania. We'll talk about the arrival that it gave everybody yesterday. It's, folks seem to be all worked up about it. But we're not worked up about anything here on tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast, which you can support very easily. If you do your shopping on Amazon, we appreciate those of you who use our referral link that is pinned to the top of the chat board, and it's also on the descriptor to this podcast. You do your Amazon shopping by starting off there, and Amazon throws us back a little bit of coin for sending you there. Doesn't cost you a dime out of your own pocket, and it's a very easy way to lend support to your favorite podcast, which of course we all know is the Joe and Joe Weather Show. But of course, the next thing, your next favorite podcast should be Weather Legends. And Rich Von Ohlen, who created and produces and hosts Weather Legends, of which Joe and I are a part of, has joined us tonight graciously. Hi, Richard. Hello.
Hey, Joe. Hey, Joe. Thanks for having me. Hello. How are you? Love the show, and pleasure to be here to kind of talk a little weather, a little bit about what we got going on.
Great. So give us a quick synopsis of how you came up with this idea. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about this just a little bit now. Then we're going to get into the weather right away, and then we're going to come back and talk some more about Weather Legend. So give us how did you came up with this? How?
Well, it's basically out of respect for who I consider to be the true legends of meteorology, particularly here in the metro New York City area. Now, there's plenty across the area, lots more across the nation. We can talk a lot about many, many others. But I chose you, Joe and Joe. I chose Bill Corbell and Pat Pagano, having grown up here on Long Island for so many years, like so many others, through the wild and crazy weather events of the last several decades. And to see how things have changed so much in the weather business, in the TV and radio and the broadcasting business, as both of you have. The evolution of technology, the Weather Service, just the use of and digestion of the weather information by the public, and always looking for ways to talk more, to explain more about how much we've seen and experienced throughout our long careers in the industry, and to share our stories, and some of the nostalgia, some of the wild stories and things I never knew about. I didn't even know about your influencers, Joe Rayo. It's wild to hear these stories, and Joe, you too, and your years at Pix, years at News 12. I mean, I was in high school when I started watching Joe Chaffee, and same thing with Joe Rayo. And I grew to kind of respect you as true legends in the industry, and to share the stories to everybody about what we've seen and what's changed so much. And we've already had a couple of those casts, which were very good. We did one on technology, did one on the NOAA cuts and weather balloons and weather data. There'll be many more to come going forward. I look very forward to hearing all your stories. And on the site itself, Joe, I've been producing and putting up some of our biographies and some of our influences and why we got into meteorology, what made us go there. And I think some of the stuff's pretty compelling, interesting, and the stories are pretty good. Pat Pagano, for example, knowing Tex Antoine. I never knew that. I mean, that's amazing that he was an influence back in the day. And it brings up a lot of names and a lot of legendary meteorologists that have paved the way for us to this day and age, where things have changed quite a bit, as we are sitting here right now doing a weather podcast, which, by the way, Joe and Joe, it's pretty darn good.
Well,
and
thank you.
I should point out to a lot of the people on Long Island who are watching that Rich Von Ohlen was the guy who was behind the scenes at Channel 61, the traffic and weather channel. And the reason why, when you were able in its heyday to turn on Channel 61 and get traffic and weather every 2 minutes, I mean, you didn't have to sit around and wait. If you were up at 2 o'clock in the morning and you heard lightning, or you saw lightning and heard thunder outside your window, or saying to yourself, wow, that sounds interesting. I wonder if there's a thunderstorm. You could immediately on Optimum click on channel 61 and within 2 minutes or less see the latest radar and get the latest information as to what was going on in your neighborhood. That was what channel 61 was. It, as I mentioned more than a few times, we at our heyday were outdrawing the Weather Channel right next door, channel 62, by a factor of 3 to 1, because people knew that you would get your traffic and weather every 2 minutes on channel 61. Now, of course, ever since Rich left, I wouldn't even talk about what channel 61 is like now. But he was the guy who made it run like a clock, so to speak. I mean, it was always reliable, and I know that Rich helped me out a lot on channel 61, and also at News 12. He was great as a, again, in the background producer, being able to produce a lot of graphics for a lot of the News 12 meteorologists. And so I don't know if I ever, thanked you enough times, Rich, but I'm thanking you here and letting everybody know that you really were a key person in the good old days of News 12.
Well, thank you, Joe. I appreciate that. And yeah, it was, a lot to kind of handle, big lift to keep everything going. So the changes so many years with all the technology, but you were terrific. The meteorologists at News 12 for all the regions that did those broadcasts really stepped forward and did a great job and made that channel what it was, still running today. It changed names, News 12 Plus, still on air. Think about that, Joe. We launched that in 1998 in August. It's still on Cablevision, on channel 61. Still running.
There's a big difference now, because when we were there, Rich, as I said, you didn't have to wait more than 2 minutes to get
Right.
the weather information you wanted. And now, fairly recently, during one of the rare snow events that we had here, I sat there, I'm watching the traffic, and I'm saying, okay, here comes weather. And then all of a sudden, there was like 5 minutes of promos, mostly for Optimum. And I'm saying, what the heck is this? I'm waiting to see the radar or whatever, over and over and over. It's nothing like it was. And of course, from midnight to 6 now, forget about it, because it's all infomercials now. And
Yeah.
that's not the way. That's not what the channel was put together for, and what the reason for that channel to be in existence for. But now the people who run it are not thinking about you. They're thinking about how they can line their pockets with more money, with more commercials. So,
Which I would just say
Yeah.
they're not doing a good job of. If you look at where Altis's stock price was dropped from where it was when it bought Cablevision to where, I haven't checked it lately, but um, it's a shadow of its full. It's down about
Yeah.
99%. So
It's
what we're
not the
going to
same
do?
weather product. Yeah.
No.
Definitely different. Yeah. Go ahead.
So what we're going to do is we're going to get into weather now for a while. We're going to come back and then talk more about weather legends. So those of you on the chat board, I've already seen a few questions. If you could just hold them until we do the weather stuff first, and then we're going to come back, and then I'll feed. Rich will be able to even see the questions that are rolling there. And welcome to you guys, everybody tonight, and welcome to those of you watching in the background. We all know you're lurking about here on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast every Sunday through Thursday at 7:35 p.m. and the occasional Friday and Saturday. So subscribe and turn your notifications on so you don't miss us. And of course, if you like the show, by all means, hit the like button. So I want to go back to yesterday, Mr. Rayo, because the change that occurred in the mid and late afternoon, which we talked about on Thursday was going to happen, was quite dramatic, to say the least. I mean, the temperature drops were enormous, and I saw a lot of people that were worked up about this, with regards to, oh my God, I've never seen this before. It's the biggest drop of temperatures in history. Blah blah blah, and I'm kind of listening, reading all this, and I'm thinking, I immediately thought back to, I think it was a couple of years ago when we had a backdoor cold front come through that was every bit as wicked as this one was. As I recall, it even came with 50-mile-an-hour wind gusts. So this is not an unusual scenario in the springtime, especially in the early part of the spring, where we had temperatures in the 20s in upstate New York and Vermont, and New Hampshire, and they had a snow and ice storm there. So it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody that when the backdoor front came, there was going to be, a pretty rapid, dramatic temperature change.
Rob, excuse me, Rob Friedowitz, who is the guy, I guess, in terms of talking about climatology in New York City, noted that Central Park's 26-degree hourly drop between 5 and 6 p.m. yesterday. We went at Central Park from 79 to 53 in 1 hour, was the second largest on record there. Ironically, the record occurred on March 27th, 1921. So it was only it was a couple of days earlier in the calendar, but in 1921, 28-degree hourly drop from 81 to 53. Yes, we do see these drops, especially in the late winter and early spring. Those are when we get the most dramatic drops in terms of temperature with backdoor fronts. So again, it was incredible. My wife was at a baby shower yesterday and stepped outside. It was nice and warm, and oh, it was so lovely. And then when the shower came to an end, she went outside. What happened? What? Oh my goodness, I'm freezing! And it really was quite dramatic as that front came sliding on down from the north and northeast through the tri-state area. And today, Joe, I don't think we didn't get out of the 40s here. So talk about that. From 80-degree one day to 40s the next day. And then tomorrow, guess what? We're going to bounce right back up, not to 80 degrees, but we'll bounce at least back up into the 60s, maybe in some areas the 70s, and that'll set the stage for a potential severe weather event locally here late tomorrow and tomorrow evening.
Well, I've got the surface maps from yesterday. This is from 2 a.m. Saturday morning, and you see the frontal boundary in southern Massachusetts. Boston never got into the warm air at all, and it went straight west across southern Mass, and then pretty much along I-90 or just south of I-90 in western New York. And as we went through the day, that stationary boundary became a cold front again. And you could see by morning that front was already through Rhode Island and the northern half of Connecticut, not quite to Poughkeepsie. And then by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it was analyzed right along the Connecticut coast to about Poughkeepsie, which was still 70, and then dropped to 58. And, then crossed eastern Long Island. And as we moved through the day at 5 o'clock, it reached LaGuardia, and there was one point last night where I think somebody put it on the chat board. LaGuardia was Kennedy at 5 o'clock was 80. The front hadn't gone through there, and it did go through LaGuardia, and LaGuardia was 51. And then by 8 o'clock, the front had plunged all the way down into central New Jersey, and then it just continued to sort of sag southward during the night, settling down in Delaware and Maryland. So, pretty impressive. And as we went through the day today, it's kind of starting now to edge back up, as you said. And this is the latest map. They have the stationary boundary running through southern New Jersey and southern Pennsylvania, still in the 40s when you go north and east of there. It's in the 70s and 80s as you go south and west of there. So from here, as you said, once that front gets further to the north, you're going to wind up getting into the warm sector again, and this is going to set up the potential for some severe weather for Monday, not just here, but then up and down the eastern seaboard. So I know Rich is excited about all the severe weather, aren't you, Rich?
Always. That's what I live for. Yeah, it's why we're meteorologists. This is what we do. It's all part of the game here. But yes, tomorrow night looks like Monday night. Little interesting line coming through, right? What are we looking at there?
Well, we're going to check in a moment. Joe Mayo's going to be doing the radars shortly. I'm just going to just
give me sharing capabilities, Joe.
Of course. And while you're setting up the radars, I'll go through the watches and warnings, and then we'll get right to it. So we still have winter weather advisories in northern New Hampshire and Maine. We have winter storm warnings on the upper peninsula of Michigan and northern Wisconsin, ice storm warnings up on the lower peninsula in northern Michigan. Winter storm watches are now up for parts of South and North Dakota into Minnesota because there's the next weather system behind this for the middle and latter part of the week. And we have numerous severe thunderstorm and tornado watches that are up from southeastern Michigan going all the way down into Arkansas and into northeastern Texas and northwest Louisiana. In the west, lots of wind advisories and some high wind warnings, winter storm warnings up for the Sierra Nevadas and for the mountains in Northern California. And here's a wide view of the radar tonight. And the severe weather is there's a lot of severe weather in the Midwest and down into the Ohio Valley and Middle Mississippi Valley. But Joe Rayo's got the local radar looks, and he's going to take a look at those in the Midwest as well. So have at it, Mr. Rayo.
Okay, we'll set the stage here. I want to adjust things here and go first to well, let's take a look at Detroit. I'm only looking at Detroit. You could see this line of rather significant weather as possibly embedded thunderstorms and severe weather. Well, I should point out also we saw what Joe just mentioned up in the northern half of the northern upper peninsula, excuse me, the lower peninsula of Michigan. There are ice storm warnings up here. It was probably cold enough for freezing precipitation, but further south it is warm enough so that the precipitation is mostly rain. And again, you see this snaky line that is moving in the direction of Detroit, and that is an area of showers and potential heavy thunderstorms. It seems to be fading out a little bit as we get to the final few frames of the loop, but still a very important and a very significant area to watch in the coming hours. Let's go to, well, let's see. Let's go to Cleveland. And
by the way, just as a point of reference here, at the moment, so it is 7:53 p.m. Eastern time. We have 24 working severe thunderstorm warnings, 7 working tornado warnings, in the mostly in the Midwest. So, go ahead, Cleveland.
Okay, well, the Cleveland radar not showing much except in the extreme western areas where you could see moving into northwestern Ohio, around Toledo, for example, that same line that we just mentioned from the Detroit radar, now moving into northwestern sections of Cleveland as well, the northwestern sections of Ohio and the Toledo area. I want to move over now to, well, let's see, let's go to central Indiana, Indianapolis, and you can see again that line. It really is a long line, and it stretches across. Now moving through the central and south central portions of Indiana, just moved through Indianapolis here, and you can see the areas of angry red. Now, in this entire region, we have tornado watches that have been posted. So there is the very definite potential in this area here for some tornadic activity, at the very least, some very damaging straight line winds. Again, with this line of heavy duty shower and thunderstorm activity. If we continue further south, let's go down to, let's say, southern Illinois. I also want to apologize. My grandson, who was with us a couple of times last week, had a cold on Tuesday when he came visiting, and guess who ended up getting my grandson's cold, and that's why my voice sounds the way it is. But in any case, here is the Evansville, Indiana radar, and you can see now moving through southern Indiana and also into southern sections of Illinois, this batch of, again, really nasty looking shower and storm activity. Again, potential for tornadic activity down here. And I don't know whether or not Mrs. Hutch, who happens to be Renata's cousin, is watching. She lives in Rush, Kentucky. And if you're watching, Maria, I just want to alert you to the fact that you and your mom will be experiencing probably some rather nasty weather in your part of Kentucky around midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning. Lovely time, by the way, to get severe weather in the middle of the night when you can't see what's coming and you can only, hear what's coming your way. But sometime around the middle of the night tonight, you may be in for some rather active weather. Anyway, this is, again, southern Illinois, southern Indiana, this line continuing to progress rapidly toward the east and southeast. One last stop here. Let's go to Missouri. And this is the St. Louis radar. And you can see that for the most part, the radar is showing that the activity is past St. Louis off to the south and east. And again, is now moving through extreme southeastern Missouri, southern sections of Indiana. And again, the angry areas of red indicative of some very nasty weather, severe weather, with the potential again for thunderstorm activity. I don't have the ability of showing where the thunderstorm warnings are, but I'm sure that any one of the areas I just showed you on any one of the radars probably has some severe thunderstorm warnings, and again, a broad area of severe thunderstorm watch zones put up out ahead of this weather front, this cold front, that will be a part of our weather here in the Northeast and the tri-state area by probably this time tomorrow night, Joe.
Okay. I got the U.S. Loop up and with lightning strikes, and you were describing the nastiness of this line. I mean, it's pretty impressive, Rich. Look at the northern part of the line in eastern Michigan, and then there's kind of a little bit of a weakness in northwest Ohio. There are some cells there, but then all of a sudden you get into central and southern Indiana, southern Illinois, and into Missouri and Arkansas. I mean, it really is impressive. A lot of lightning strikes, very impressive. And the way the risk areas are set up tonight, further to the east and south, there's going to be a southern area that's going to fire up in the deep south during the overnight. That's going to be moving eastward. You can't help but be impressed by the severe weather here.
Yeah, pretty impressive. We've been seeing this, every couple of weeks. We had a good outbreak a few weeks ago, even as early March. And then, if you look at the Storm Prediction Center heading out even towards, the day on Monday into Tuesday, it looks like a lot of the deep south and the southeastern states gets a batch. That's going to hold together, it looks like, and the East Coast probably gets rocked pretty good. But it's funny, if you look at some of these, the maps, Joe, for the outlooks, the marine layer, the Northeast, some areas right near the coast do get kind of saved a bit, but the farther inland you go, obviously away from the coast, tends to be where that more severe weather tends to develop. So inland areas, it's game on when you got a situation like this, and these upper lows are they've been pretty strong. A lot of spin on these, and certainly indicative of what Mr. Rayo just showed us there with the lightning and the radars going on across the Midwest and the Ohio Valley. So yeah, pretty active.
These warm fronts tend to start to look like hairpins when they push up through Pennsylvania and upstate New York and through New Jersey, and then they run. The frontal line will run down through Western Mass and Western Connecticut and cut across Western Long Island. So yeah, the marine layer is a big deal this time of year, and always is in the spring. Now, my general rule is if you have any kind of if you've got a south wind of at least for Long Island and points east, you're going to see you'll watch how many times I can remember you watching a radar that looked like the end of the world was coming, and then as soon as they cross the GW Bridge and get into Western Nassau County, there is nothing, or it just falls apart.
Yep. Seen that many times. Challenging forecast. I know when Joe Rayo was working up in the Westchester area, we used to watch and track what he was doing and see how things were going. And then we were like, are they going to hold together? And a lot of times they just went, what was the word, Joe? Poof. And that was it.
Poof.
The forecast for tomorrow from SPC, I'm maybe jumping the gun here, but we'll soon see for tomorrow. They have the gradient between slight chance to marginal risk to general thunderstorms to no thunderstorms is rather tight, right again where the Westchester, Connecticut zone is, because again those thunderstorms are going to be running higher, and they'll be petering out before they have a chance to do much damage. Let's say to areas further to the east in Connecticut and across Long Island.
You got I had the Storm Prediction Center map up for tonight, and you see where the enhanced risk, and you can also see that there's 2 severe thunderstorm watch boxes that are up. A new one has just gone up for southeast Texas and parts of southeast Texas and western Louisiana, and then you've got 3 tornado watch boxes that are up to the northeast of that run all the way up into Ohio. And the eastern flank of the enhanced risk is covering for later tonight. So you were talking earlier about getting thunderstorms at night in some areas you go further east. Yeah, it's never fun to get a well-developed line of thunderstorms in the middle of the night. So this is what it looks like on SPC's map for the rest of the evening and for the overnight, with the enhanced risk from southern Michigan down to Alabama, Mississippi, northern Louisiana, and northeast Texas. The slight risk pushes into western Pennsylvania and western Virginia, into northeast Georgia, which is where I am. And the tornado risk is a large area of 10%, and the hatched indicates that there is EF2 to EF5 tornado risk in northern Mississippi, northwest Alabama, the western half of Tennessee, western Kentucky, southern Indiana, southern Illinois, southeastern Missouri, and eastern Arkansas. Now, tomorrow, everything's going to shift to the East Coast.
Yeah,
And
much less.
yeah, so now there's that, you describe the, general, the marginal, the slight, and, the marginal line that runs down through Western Mass, Connecticut into Western Long Island. I mean, you're basically drawing the shape of the warm front, which, gets all the way up into northern New York, and then turns in Vermont, where it's hitting snow cover and ice from the last 2 days, and then dropping straight south down the coast. So, yeah, this is not going to be conducive for severe weather for much of southern New England and southeastern New England, but it pushes the slight risk up to through the Hudson Valley and up through the Catskills, Joe Ray. Obviously, the warm front's going to be the big deal for tomorrow, and when how this all sets up. So, if we start seeing indications that the front's going to be further north and east, then SPC is going to have to make some adjustments here. And conversely, if it's further south and west, they're going to have to make adjustments the other way.
And one thing that we'll be looking for tonight, at least I'll be looking for, because we've had a number of nights like this, is fog. And if that front is anywhere near me tomorrow, I fully expect tomorrow morning to wake up to a very thick cloak of fog, sometimes so thick that you can barely see more than 500 feet. And again, we've had a couple of those kind of nights and early mornings in recent days here. And with that warm front, again, in our general vicinity tomorrow morning, I don't expect the warm front to get past me until sometime after sunrise tomorrow. So as we go deeper into the night tonight, we're probably going to be seeing fog become more widespread and getting all the thicker, if you will, in the pre-dawn hours tomorrow morning.
So, Rich, if you think maybe we could break out, there might be some showers that run out ahead of this overnight, and they should mostly be gone tomorrow morning. Now, sometimes we've had situations like this where you get a band of renegade showers that runs ahead of the main line, and it essentially, as they go through it, they cool and stabilize the atmosphere. But if they come through late at night and they're gone by daybreak, the question in my mind becomes, does some areas break out into some sun, which helps to force add for some daytime heating?
Yeah, it's always the big question. I think you have a lot of CAPE, though, a lot of moisture in the middle levels of the atmosphere. It's just like you said, if the sun breaks out, you get more of a lifted index. You can get some lift in there. I think, though, like I said, this marine layer, I've just learned this from years and years of forecasting here across the tri-state and, parts of New England. That marine layer just knocks things down. Any little breeze, slight breeze from the south, anything that mixes in, like they're showing, will just knock these things down. It's amazing. But yeah, west of us, certainly, little sun there, Pennsylvania, Scranton areas, Trenton, down towards DC, Baltimore, certainly down towards Raleigh and parts of Virginia. I think you're in a, pretty, good chance they're getting hit pretty hard there. An enhanced area, Joe. That's pretty broad there, from southeastern Mississippi all the way up towards, the Maryland-Virginia border there. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I mean, basically, I'm going to draw in, so your front kind of looks like this. It's sort of northeast, southwest, and your warm front, I misdrew it, so let me do it again. The warm front is, that's what when I say a hairpin, it, obviously it's a little tighter, but that's kind of what tends to happen, especially in the spring.
Yeah. Exactly.
But yeah, the tornado risk from SPC is 2% now. This is the one thing they did change today is that they actually they had the under 2% tornado risk earlier but in their latest forecast they've pushed the 2% tornado risk line up into the Catskills and into south central New York, central and western PA, and all of New Jersey, into Delaware and Maryland. And then you go south from there, you got the 5% area the south of Washington, D.C., and in Northern Virginia. And then it goes enhanced from Virginia on south of 10%, and all in that enhanced zone. They did not hatch it, so they don't have EF2 at this point, at this stage. They're not indicating a higher risk for EF2s to EF5s.
Mm.
So that's at least a plus.
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't want to see that hatched area.
Yeah, I know. I think you need that good daytime heating, and we had the very warm day just yesterday on Saturday, so it's not out of the question we can get very warm. But I think you also need that full sunshine, like you said. If we don't get that, like as Joe mentioned, if there's some fog in there, I think we'll probably be okay here. But certainly down south will be a different story.
Now, the next day is Tuesday into Wednesday, and we're looking at a new area of severe weather risk from north central Texas through Oklahoma, Missouri, Iowa, Illinois, southern Nebraska, and much of Kansas. And this is going to be with the next storm system. And when we look at SPC's long range, and everybody that watches the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast knows that when SPC puts stuff in the long range, it's probably a good idea to pay attention. And once again, on day 4, which is Wednesday into Thursday, they already have added a 30% implied enhanced risk from northeast Texas up the middle Mississippi Valley into the Ohio Valley and lower Great Lakes. And the slight risk goes even further north up into Michigan. And on day 5, they have an implied slight risk running northeast southwest from southern Ohio and West Virginia, southwest through Kentucky, Tennessee, Arkansas, into northeast Mississippi. So, I always like to think that, when SPC does this stuff and they show it up in the long range, Joe Rayo, it is a really good indicator that it's going to be a problem when we get there.
And something that you certainly would have to keep your eye on. And as we move along, you may remember that, for many days, SPC had just a 15% area across much of the Atlantic seaboard for tomorrow. And as we get closer to the event, you see now that they have an enhanced zone, and they actually have moved the area of potential severe weather up to the north. So these are not chiseled in stone, so to speak. They change slowly but surely too, and usually when they change for the worse, unless you really like to see severe weather. So you have to keep all of that in mind.
WPC tonight on their 7-day forecast is loaded with rain, particularly in western Kentucky into northeastern Arkansas. They've got an area there of 10 inches or more over the next 7 days. I mean, they have a really robust area of heavy rain of 5 inches or more that goes from northeast Texas and eastern Oklahoma, northeast. We haven't seen all the way up into southern Ohio. We haven't seen a setup like this in a while. And a lot of areas in Illinois and Indiana and Ohio are still pretty dry from drought conditions. So this could be pretty encouraging for them. 1.5 to 2 inch plus rainfalls over the next 7 days across Pennsylvania into southern New England. Lesser amounts as you go south and southeast. In the west, it's mostly in the Sierra Nevadas and in northwest California with heavy precipitation there. And the Sierra Nevadas is, I don't know about you, Rich, but I occasionally like reading their forecast where they put up a winter weather advisory for 24 to 36 inches.
Yeah, I love those too. They're always fun.
Those are always fun. And, you look at some of their forecasts sometimes and it's got, rain for, precip mentioned for 7 days in a row. Brandon Doherty hits the tip jar tonight as he's lurking in the background, busy with his teaching. Very good, sir. Thank you so much for hitting Super Chat. It is most appreciated. So we'll take a look at the GFS. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift over to the upper air first and take a look at the overall pattern. Because one of the things that's happening is that you are still getting a cold flow of air from Canada. This time of year, you still have cold air masses in Canada, Spring is about redistribution of the last of the cold air and moving it southward. At the same time, the south is warming up fairly rapidly with the each day getting deeper and deeper into spring, which makes for a lot of troughs coming through and a lot of turbulence. There's a deep trough coming into the west. The current one is lifting around the Great Lakes on Monday and Tuesday, which is what's causing everything now. Then you got another deep trough with a cutoff low that runs up into Minnesota on Wednesday, and the southern part of the trough stays down into Southern California. We get some ridging here in the east, but there's more flow from Canada that keeps coming down. Look at this trough that's set up, in about 8 days, from Hudson Bay down all the way into central Florida. With this, that is a chilly upper air for this time of year. I mean, if this verifies, this would be around April 7th or 8th. This would mean, some unseasonably chilly air coming into the eastern half of the U.S.
No question about it. That would be a most definite sign toward a colder airflow. And yeah, we've been saying, when is the atmosphere going to get favorable for, some kind of a wintry type precipitation pattern? And it always seems that last year, for example, some of the biggest snowfalls we had was in late March and early April. Not saying that's going to happen again this year, but why is it that the more favored or for snow lovers and winter weather enthusiasts, why does it wait until the end of the season or even after the season is officially over for all of this to line up?
Rich knows he has connections, right, Rich?
I wish I did. I'd be a billionaire. Actually, I only have theories, and this is one of the topics that we talk about, and perhaps one we will discuss maybe on Weather Legends at some point. We talk about the climate and things of changing. I've always think there's a climate shift. I think a lot of times, a lot of seasons in the past several years, we've been seeing the falls last longer. It stays warmer through like December, and then finally it gets cold. And like Joe Rayo mentioned, it takes a couple of months to get that good solid winter pattern to finally give us a snow pattern. And by the time we get there, it's March and April. Now we're getting a high sun angle. So it's hard to really, pile up the snow with the nice, dry, cold ground. And I think for snow lovers, they get kind of like cheated out on that almost every season. And you're right. It seems to be every year it's the same old story. Fall lasts longer, and then spring takes forever to kick in. And then what you just showed, Joe, with the maps, the upper air, and I'm looking at it too here on the GFS and the Euro. I tell you what, middle of April, it looks pretty chilly. I mean, that's pretty cold. And, and that too, with dry, cold air coming in with the sun angle this time of year, you also got to consider the low relative humidity and the fire potential too. There's a lot of things we have to deal with.
That's been a big deal here in the last week, particularly in Western North Carolina.
Yeah. I mean, with those dry conditions, we saw that happen a few weeks ago in Long Island. We saw it happen in the Carolinas. It's been happening in other parts of the country. You just got this bone dry kind of cold air coming down, and then you get the sun goes up, you get the very low relative humidity, and without a lot of rain the last several weeks and months, you got a problem. And I think this doesn't go away anytime too soon, right, Joe?
You talk about the high sun angle. We should also mention that not only do you sometimes get abnormally cold weather at this time of the year, and also a wintry pattern, but you can also sometimes jump the gun and get into a summertime pattern. Now, a few people on the chat board have been talking about April 1976. That was the big heat wave that hit this part of the country. In fact, April 18th, 1976 was Easter Sunday, and that was made all the more memorable by temperatures that were more apropos for midsummer. The temperature on that day, April 18th, 1976, hit 96 degrees. That broke the old record for April 18th of 90, set back in 1896. And it was also the hottest Easter Sunday on record, easily surpassing the old record of 86 that was set twice on April 22nd in 1962 and in 1973. And for the only time in history, that one day, April 18th, 1976, New York City had the hottest temperature in the nation. It was the national high, New York City, with 96 degrees on April 18th, 1976. And I remember, Joe, I think I was filling in for you at News 12 Long Island. And you may remember, this goes back into the 80s now, late 80s, early 90s. One of the people who occasionally would show up and do a segment at News 12 Long Island, Stan Dworkin. And Stan and his wife, Floss Dworkin, had a radio show in the Hudson Valley in Westchester County. And so he's sitting at the anchor desk watching me as I'm talking about April 1976, and I could see him nodding his head up and down. And I knew that Stan remembered that hot Easter of 1976. I mean, if you were around in 1976, Easter Sunday, you easily remember that particular date. And it's funny, because it's a movable feast. Easter could have the weather of Christmas time, or you could have the weather of July 4th. Yesterday, March 29th, was the 55th anniversary of the famous Easter snowstorm here in New York. 4 inches in New York City. If rain went to snow. And up where I live, here in Putnam Valley, we probably had anywhere between 9 and 12 inches of snow for Easter Sunday, 1970. Then 6 years later, look what happened. Easter went in April and 96 degrees. Ta-da.
So, yeah, and you know when you're an Italian and you cook Easter dinner, nobody wants to cook a lasagna at 96 degrees,
No.
when it's outside. Just real quickly, just looking at the European surface, the European I think has done a whole lot better than the GFS recently, and you see tonight's storm system running up into the Ohio Valley, and the low goes up into western New York. The warm front pushing northward tonight, with, as I said, maybe some showers during the overnight. Then here comes the front with some showers and storms. I'm sorry, let me back up because I was actually showing the next one. But here's tonight's, where you got the Great Lakes low, some renegade showers that run overnight, mostly to the north, and then you get the line of storms that develops in the east for later tomorrow and tomorrow night. Kind of lingers into the first part of almost to daybreak Tuesday before it pulls away. GFS is a little longer to get out of the way. Then we'll just dry and chilly. Here comes the next low into Kansas on Wednesday. And here's another severe weather outbreak as SPC's, was enhancing the area in the Mississippi and Ohio valleys. You can see that the European is very bullish, actually quite bullish for late Wednesday and Wednesday night in Kentucky and Tennessee. And then it continues on Thursday from Ohio southwest into Arkansas. Another front pushing through the east on Thursday with some showers, and then even some more on Friday. And then we get another system that comes up over the weekend that develops in the Gulf states and moves up into Missouri and over into the Great Lakes with another weather front maybe next weekend, late next weekend. And then here comes colder air into the east with that deep trough. If it winds up verifying, we'll have to obviously wait and see on that. But severe weather is front and center, certainly for many areas around the country over the next week or so. And we're always on top of it, no matter where it is, here on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. Okay, Rich, let's just change. Let's go back to weather legends and talk a little bit about weather legends. By the way, I'm very humbled, which is just a very hard thing to do, as most of my close friends will tell you, that you made me part of this, and I'm a part of Weather Legends, and I'm really thrilled and very appreciative of it. I even shaved and trimmed my beard so that I would look presentable. But yeah, so you came up with this idea. What is where do you see this show going? This podcast
Well,
going?
I see it expanding, if anything. Like I said, I think you and Joe and Bill and Pat, I think are the starters here. There are a lot of legends out there. We can name a bunch of names. I can roll a bunch off my tongue right now if I wanted to. I mean, a lot of people have asked me, oh, there's more. I know there's plenty there. And I know the names that many other chats here and many will be thinking about and mentioning. And yes, it's definitely in my mind to get those meteorologists that have been doing weather for so many years and decades to chat with us and to share their stories and their insights about what they've experienced throughout the years. Again, like a lot of weather is obviously forecasting what we do. That's the big, the big drive. But a lot of it's experience. A lot of it's the what we went through, the storms, Joe, the blizzards, Sandy. We're really trying to talk to, I guess, some of the younger generations that may not have experienced the blizzard of '96, that maybe didn't see what happened with some of the nor'easters and the storm of '78. I didn't even know the Lindsay Storm. You guys both talked about the Lindsay blizzard. I mean, I don't think I was even around yet. And there's so many stories that come from that we could learn from. And, you always hear about the weather getting crazier these days. It wasn't that, back in the day. And I think there were some storms back in those days that you may have to recall and say, oh my goodness, hurricanes, storms, tornado outbreaks, things we learned, as we went through school, as we went through our process. And I think, you point those out. And I think that's part of the history. It's almost like a history lesson, about what we've seen and what we've experienced. And when you hear the insights about when we were there forecasting those storms and what it was like, Joe mentioned about the Lindsay Storm when he was riding on the board and he was, I guess, competing with, Frank Field, Joe. It was the whole story you told, and how they were calling for rain and you called for snow and you got it right. I mean, that's fascinating. That's just stuff, that, before we were professionals, that we just had in our blood. And I think that's what I want to talk about going, a lot.
I think I was actually, I may have mentioned this on the, when I was telling the story, that I was thinking actually for that storm, I was forecasting with my heart. I was a big snow lover back then, and was kind of hoping that everything would fall into place for snow. But the real end of the story was that many years later, when I got my first job, the guy who was my boss, Todd Gross, who owned the company I was working at, he showed me a few weather maps, and he said, what would you forecast for this? And I looked at it, I said, well, it might start off as a little snow, but look at the east wind. The east wind is going to come in. It's probably going to change everything over to rain. And he laughed, a big guffaw, if you will. And he says, well, you just fell into the same trap that everybody else fell into. That was the Lindsay Storm. I mean, here, as a 13 or 14-year-old kid, I forecasted snow with that storm, but that was because I wanted snow and I was hoping for snow. But if you looked at it from the standpoint of meteorological experience and knowledge and everything, you would have gone for rain, which is what everybody went for. And that day, that Lindsay Storm, the thing that was somewhat annoying to me was that every hour we were listening on the radio, don't worry, the snow is going to change to rain. Don't worry, don't worry, don't worry. By the time we got to like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, they all threw up their arms and said, we don't know. It hasn't changed over yet. And by that time, we had like 12 inches or 14. And we had a, 15 to 20 inches out of that storm. And nobody was prepared for it. Nobody. The guys who were supposed to clean the roads, the sanitation department, they were sitting at home, drinking coffee and eating a Danish on a Sunday morning, reading the paper. It's going to change to rain. And all of a sudden they get these phone calls. You got to come in. You got to come in. Get the trucks out. We got to clear away the snow. But they couldn't get in because the roads were already clogged with snow. It was a disaster. And amazingly, even though John Lindsay, the mayor of New York, got the blame for that, he managed to get it reelected later that year, because I think he got reelected because the Mets won the World Series, and he's in the clubhouse there with champagne pouring on top of his head. He's pouring champagne on Ron Swoboda's head, and everybody said, "Oh, is that, and he got elected on that, and everybody kind of forgot about the snow that fell in February of that year."
Rich, Tom Contino on the chat board has a question, as only Tom can ask this.
Okay, go ahead, Tom.
Do you think that the old meteorologists, okay, with an emphasis on old, are the results are resentful of the evolution of social media? Which I think is actually an interesting question, but I'd like to hear your angle on this.
Yeah, I don't know that they're necessarily resentful, but I think they are more, I guess, respectful of how we used to do it in the old days before social media was there, how we connected with our viewers when there were only a handful of TV stations and we weren't doing weather as often as it is today, and how we had to message that. We actually did a story on this a few days ago about how we communicated, how technology changed. and the way we had to communicate. And Joe Rayo, you were in radio for the long time too. I mean, you weren't in front of the camera. You didn't have maps. You had to talk to people and explain it. And back in those days, way before social media and technology and the internet, that was your source. So, I mean, we have the more sources today, but I think the way you communicate and still have to get the message out there still exists. I mean, you could do all you want on social media. You could post, we've talked about this too, maps, and there's so much available now on the internet now. So many free sites that anybody can go to, but you still have to know what you're doing. I think older meteorologists have that wealth of knowledge and understanding about what's nonsense and what's real and how to communicate the real stuff to people that need to know. And I think we, as the legends, do that perhaps the best. But there are some good meteorologists that are learning, that are catching up, that are doing their job, and learning that. But it's a different world now that we had seen many years ago. And I think the old meteorologists will look and say, hey, we did it well 40, 50 years ago, and we did it without all the social media. How about that?
I think people who started in radio, when they made the transition like myself to television, it was much easier, as opposed to, and I know quite a few TV guys, people who started in television, who ended up, getting a side job doing weather on radio. It was more difficult for them because now they actually had to explain it. They were not able to simply stand in front of a map and point and say, see, here's this cold front, and see, here's this high pressure system. They actually had to describe it. And I think in terms of sports, one guy who was wonderful in painting word pictures for you was the legendary Met broadcaster Bob Murphy. Bob Murphy, if you were a Met fan, he was on radio and he did a fantastic job in setting everything up and explaining. You could actually see mentally what was going on the field because he painted beautiful pictures with his words, and you were able to identify and know exactly what was going on, as opposed to somebody else who, again, was more a TV person and, again, would have somewhat more difficulty in describing for his radio audience what was going on. So I started in radio, was in radio for 17 years, and then finally made the transition over to television. Actually, I didn't start at News 12. This might be another story that I could tell sometime down the road. I was so desperate to get into television. I really wanted to see what it would be like. And I ended up doing TV for Channel 21, WLIW.
Yeah.
There was a short interval in the mid 80s where they had a program called the Long Island Report. And it was on from 6:30 to 7 o'clock on Channel 21. And it was anchored by Palmer Payne. There's a name that those of you who are into radio may remember. He was on News Radio 88 or News Radio 880, and he was the anchor person. And I watched this for a few nights, and I called up Channel 21 and said, hey, you need a weather forecaster? And the guy who was the news director at the time over at Channel 21 says, we'd love to have you, Joe, because he used to listen to me on WGSM and WBLI out on Long Island. He said, I'd love to have you, but I can't pay you anything. And I said, I'll do it for nothing. And I did 6 months of Channel 21, and that got me ingrained in what television was all about. And then it was when it came time to do an audition for News 12, I just took some of the stuff I did on Channel 21, brought it over, and they said, okay, we'll give you a chance to do an audition. So really, that's how I got started in television. I ended up doing TV for nothing, in order to get my foot in the door. And that eventually worked its way up to fill-ins at News 12 Long Island, a full-time position at News 12 Westchester. That's how it all begins sometimes. That's what you have to do sometimes to get into TV.
Rich, another question from Phone King. It just occurred to me, Joe. I wish PP Face were on the chat board tonight. I haven't seen him in a while. He says, who sets the tone for meteorologist broadcast in terms of adding more hype or less hype? Is it the news director? Is it the station president? Is it the Mets themselves? Where do you think that? How do you answer that?
Like we said, it all rolls downhill. Okay, typically it comes from the president who has the vision and the orders from the CEO to increase the revenue and do whatever has to be done to get those ratings up and to yeah. And unfortunately, in many cases, this is not a secret, to hype the weather and make it seem scarier at times than it really is. You see a lot of this. In fact, I was just reading some stuff about some of the network stations putting everything's life-threatening weather, millions of people at risk. It's all made to sound like it's like the Armageddon. When in essence, if you really think about it, a lot of times it's portions of those areas that are really hit hard. The majority, it's not like an all-out Armageddon where an entire state is wiped out. It's portions, and that goes especially for tornadoes. But with the TV business, look, if it bleeds, it leads is still very, very real. A lot of network stations are struggling to stay afloat, and I can understand from the financial standpoint that they need to do what they have to do. But there's a balance, though. You got to be respectful, and you got to do the right thing and responsible when it comes to your audience and your viewers. You can't hype everything, because what happens is when you hype everything, there is no big storm. It's the same old storm. And when the real one really comes, no one's going to be ready, not going to believe you. That's a big problem. And that happened kind of with Sandy, because it's, just another storm, hurricane coming. It wasn't just another storm. It was a disaster.
Joe Rayo.
Yes.
We'll make this the last question and the most important question from Dave. Dave Kuntz. How is our weather for the Mets home opener on Friday?
I would have to say that at least I think it's going to be a mild day, relatively speaking, with temperatures in the 60s. But the weather front that's going to move in on Thursday and bring us the chance for another round of showers and thunderstorms may end up stalling in our vicinity on Friday. And we may unfortunately have some showers to contend with on Friday as well. And those showers look like they may carry over into next weekend. Not too sure about that just yet, but unlike the Yankees, which got a beautiful sunny day for their opening day, I don't quite see that happening for the Mets. It may turn out to be a bit on the unsettled side, but knowing how opening day is and what a big day that is in terms of the cash box, even if there's a chance for some scattered showers or some rain, they'll still try to get that game in, however unfavorable it may be for the ball players. But that's how it looks right now. I'd say that there's at least a chance for some shower activity on Friday, along with temperatures probably somewhere in the 60s.
Rich, tell everybody where they can find Weather Legends.
Okay, Weather Legends, we have a YouTube channel. You can check that out. Go to YouTube and subscribe to our wonderful Weather Legends site. I think you'll actually love not just the live podcast that we'll be doing. There'll be one tomorrow at 2:00 in the afternoon. But check out the biographies, the influencers. We can read about Sherm, right, Joe? Sure. Fascinating story there. I love that. And all of our favorite anchors who we love to work with, and what inspired us to become meteorologists. Check out some of those videos. They're kind of interesting. And we'll hopefully get some steady schedules out, Joe, on Weather Legends on YouTube. And I also have a podcast now on Spotify. You can check that out. Subscribe to that. And like I said, I think we're going to do a lot more of this, because it seems to be a very likable and very interesting and compelling place to go. And I think good stories.
All right. Joe, you got any final words before we say goodnight?
No, not really. Tomorrow should be interesting, though, because 7:35 is our normal sign-on time, and I suspect at 7:35 tomorrow night, Joe, it's going to be rather active here in the tri-state area, with that area of showers and storms probably either descending upon our area, or we'll be right in the thick of things by that time tomorrow evening. So we'll see how that all pans out.
Okay. And of course, we will be here live tomorrow night at 7:35 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm going to post the YouTube link here on the chat board, and I'm going to pin it to the top. So for those of you who want to go to Weather Legends and look what's been done so far, because quite a bit is already on there. And make sure you subscribe to the Weather Legends channel and turn your notifications on. So you don't, not only because you already subscribed to us, you don't miss us, and you don't miss the Weather Legends podcast. Rich, hang on for a minute because I just got to tell you something afterward in private. And
Okay.
everybody, we'll see you all tomorrow night at 7:35 p.m. All right. Have a good night, and we'll see you tomorrow.